What was meant to be a delightful surprise for my wife transformed into an unexpected journey as I found myself relocating to another city alone. Greetings and welcome. Delight in the offerings, join our community, and activate notifications to stay updated. Nathan was a man of fervent passion, deeply enamored with Sabrina. At the very first sight, he realized he would go to any lengths to capture her heart. And he indeed did. He battled, endured, revealed his true self, and demonstrated that he sought not mere fleeting moments, but a profound life together with her. Years later, now married with two beloved children, he retained that same sparkle in his eyes whenever he spoke of her, as if time had stood still. Each wedding anniversary unfolded with an abundance of love, thoughtful gifts, delightful surprises, and heartfelt declarations. To Nathan, nothing held greater value than the family he cherished above all else. It was for this very reason that, on that fateful day, he resolved to embark on a remarkable endeavor. The scheme was straightforward, yet rich with significance. He departed from work ahead of schedule, made a brief visit to her cherished flower shop, and selected a bouquet that he was certain would bring a smile to her face. He ventured into a store, finally succumbing to the allure of a piece of jewelry he had admired for weeks, fully aware that it would delight her. He seized a bottle of wine, paused at the bakery, and selected the cake they invariably chose for special occasions. In his imagination, all would unfold flawlessly. He would come home unexpectedly, envelop her in his arms, express his deep affection, and proclaim that she was the most wonderful thing that had ever entered his life. They would coven yet another year of their union, just as they had done time and again. As he navigated the familiar roads back home, his heart quickened, not out of doubt, but from a delightful sense of expectation, that exhilarating sensation that arises when one is on the verge of bringing joy to another. His mind was consumed by thoughts of her reaction, the warmth of her smile, the closeness of their embrace, the sweetness of their kiss, and the delight in the children's eyes as they witnessed their parents commemorating another year of love together. He genuinely felt that his life was a joyful existence, a fortunate journey, founded on love, respect, and companionship. He meticulously orchestrated the surprise while the children were away at school, ensuring it would be an intimate moment for just the two of them. As he maneuvered his vehicle into the garage, his gaze fell upon the front door, which stood slightly ajar, inviting curiosity. It felt peculiar, yet he remained oblivious to any underlying truths. He collected the bags, rearranged the flowers, and swung the door open, wearing that goofy smile that comes when you're on the verge of delighting someone dear to you. What unfolded in the ensuing moments was an occurrence he had never, throughout his entire existence, envisioned himself encountering. Upon crossing the threshold of the house, he was met with a faint, muffled sound emanating from the upper levels. Initially, he believed it was the television, but soon he came to the realization that it was not. As he ascended, each footfall brought the sounds into sharper focus, resonating with an intensity that made him hesitate, reluctant to confront the truth awaiting him at the top of the stairs. His heart began to race. His palms glistened with perspiration, his entire being quaked, and for reasons he could not articulate, he continued to move forward. As he approached the bedroom door, an inexplicable stillness enveloped him the moment he pushed it open. Before him lay a tableau he had never envisioned encountering. Sabrina, his beloved wife, occupied the bed they had shared for 19 years, beneath the sheets they had selected together, resting on the pillows where they had drifted off in each other's embrace countless times, now with another man. A stranger, a man he had never encountered before. It was neither a blunder nor a warm embrace, nor was it a case of misunderstanding. It was precisely as it appeared. Two bodies entwined, unburdened by concern or guilt, as though it were the most natural occurrence in existence. Nathan stood motionless. The flowers tumbled from his grasp, the bag containing the gift dropped to the ground, and the shattering of the wine bottle resonated in his mind like a haunting melody, each fragment of sound stretching into eternity. Silence enveloped him, his lips sealed tight. Silence enveloped the scene, devoid of screams, inquiries, or any utterance. Only silence prevails. A hush enveloped him, yet within, a tempest of thoughts erupted, each one vying for attention. In what manner? What is the reason behind this? Since when has this been the case? And above all, how could she possibly act this way after all they had endured together? The evidence lay starkly before him, and upon catching sight of him, Sabrina's composure shattered. She hastily yanked the sheet to shield herself, her eyes wide with shock, rendered speechless in that moment. The man, ghostly and quaking with terror, staggered out as he fumbled to hastily don his garments. Nathan erupted in a tempest of rage and anguish, his voice echoing through the air, while the man bolted from the house, escaping without a single glance behind him. Sabrina, engulfed in a whirlwind of panic, crumpled to the floor, clutching the sheet tightly against her body. Tears streamed down her face as she cried out, unable to articulate her thoughts, her sobs a desperate plea for understanding amidst the depths of her despair. Nathan stepped back, a pounding in his head and a sensation in his chest, as if it might explode from the agony. With legs unsteady beneath him, he descended the stairs, pushed open the door, and slipped into the car, a cloud of uncertainty hanging over him as he pondered his next move. He was acutely aware that remaining there was no longer an option. His vision blurred, and tears started to cascade, first hesitantly, then in a torrent, accompanied by a suffocating blend of anger, anguish, and disbelief. His heart ached, as though it had been gripped tightly, leaving only the raw sting of anguish in its wake. Nathan navigated the roads with no destination in mind, adrift in thought, his mind a whirlwind as he grappled with the surreal reality unfolding around him. He navigated the city streets for what felt like an eternity, caught in a tempest of emotions, teetering on the brink of tears, yearning to unleash a primal scream, or simply vanish into thin air. Yet, as he pondered further, his anger only deepened. The anguish paved the path for an insatiable quest for understanding. He sought clarity. He longed to understand her reasons. He had to uncover the timeline, the identity of that man, and the motivations that drove her to commit such an unthinkable act after nearly 2 decades of shared life. Unbeknownst to him, he found himself on the path leading back home. He halted the vehicle, inhaled deeply, and stepped inside. Sabrina sat on the couch, curled up in a ball, tears streaming down her cheeks, her face flushed and her hands trembling uncontrollably. Upon catching sight of him, she attempted to articulate her thoughts, yet Nathan refused to allow her the chance. He cut through the air with precision, his voice steady yet brimming with indignation, inquiring, "Since when? Who is that fellow? What compelled you to treat me this way? What prompted you to take this action against our family?" She, utterly bewildered, stammered, claiming she was unaware, that it had been an error, that she was perplexed, that it held no significance. Vacuous justifications, irrational, devoid of significance, eluding any definitive response, she averted her gaze, attempted to rationalize her actions, yet only exacerbated the situation. Nathan's fists tightened, a desperate attempt to rein in his spiraling thoughts, to stave off the brink of madness that loomed ever closer. It was as if he were conversing with a complete stranger, an individual he had never envisioned crossing paths with. After a brief moment of contemplation, he came to the conclusion that remaining there served no purpose any longer. She lacked the bravery to confess anything, nor to reveal the truth. That was the final tipping point. In silence, he ascended the stairs, retrieved a suitcase, hastily packed it with clothes, important documents, and anything else that caught his eye, before descending once more. He traversed the living room, casting a final glance in her direction, and with a voice thick with emotion, uttered the words, "I'm leaving. On this day that I shall not return." He departed, the door crashing shut behind him, and in that instant, the sole truth he grasped was that this house would forever remain devoid of the warmth of home. That woman would forever remain a distant memory, never to weave herself back into the fabric of his life. Nathan stirred from his slumber, finding himself sprawled on the couch in Mark's living room. His head pounded, and his entire body felt as if it were being pressed down by an unseen weight. Sleep eluded him, and in the scant hours when it finally graced him, He found himself trapped in a relentless loop of that harrowing scene. As he pondered the situation, it became increasingly difficult to accept that everything unfolding before him was, in fact, reality. What had he done to warrant such a fate? How could someone to whom he devoted nearly half his life so brazenly dismantle everything? He sought, in every possible manner, to uncover answers deep within, yet none resonated with clarity. As if the weight of his troubles wasn't heavy enough, a deeper anguish settled in when he confronted the stark reality of his children's absence. For the first time in his life, he awoke to a silence that felt both foreign and profound, devoid of Emily's calls for her dad or Logan's energetic pleas for assistance echoing through the house. A stillness that felt as though it were howling within him. It shattered the last vestiges of hope. Yet, in the absence of strength, he understood the necessity of making choices. This chaos had woven itself into the fabric of his existence, and to feign it as a mere nightmare would alter nothing. As the afternoon waned, he inhaled deeply and resolved to connect with the children. He found it unfathomable that they remained unaware of the events that had transpired. He dispatched messages, attempted calls, and when he finally succeeded in conversing with Emily, the impact was even more profound. Her response was devoid of warmth, marked by an icy detachment. She claimed to be aware of the circumstances, yet insisted it was his responsibility. She cast it upon him with a fierce clarity, asserting that Sabrina's actions were a direct reflection of his perpetual absence, his chill demeanor, and his prioritization of work over the warmth of family. Words that struck his heart with the force of a dagger, and deep within, he understood that this was not originating from her. This stemmed from the insidious influence Sabrina had woven into the fabric of the children's thoughts. He attempted to reason, striving to convey to Emily that it was illogical, that he had consistently been there, perpetually dedicating himself to that family. Yet, it felt as though I were conversing with a mere barrier. On the other side, he was met with a barrage of accusations, judgments, and criticisms, as if, in the blink of an eye, he had transformed into a stranger, a figure of disdain, someone deemed perpetually inadequate. Logan found himself in a familiar predicament once more. Despite his youth, he appeared to have committed the very same lines to memory, as though they had been primed for this moment. Nathan ended the call, fragments of emotion swirling within him. The unfolding events surpassed the darkest realms of any nightmare. Sabrina had not merely shattered a union. She had shattered a whole family, and that pain cut deeper than any act of treachery. Days passed in isolation, a haze of disbelief enveloping him as he sifted through each word, each dismissal. He grappled with the haunting question of whether there had ever been a moment when he was genuinely cherished by those who now hurled venomous words at him, words he had never envisioned would be directed his way. Yet, as the days unfolded, the anguish gradually morphed into a simmering rage. He struggled to embrace the role of the antagonist. He found it impossible to reconcile the weight of his unwavering commitment with the fabrications spun by such a duplicitous individual. In that moment, he resolved to take action. He started to collect documents, evidence, payment records, old messages, everything that could reveal his true identity within that house. He sought the counsel of lawyers, grasped the intricacies of his rights, and steeled himself for what would become the most formidable struggle of his existence. In the interim, Sabrina remained engrossed in her game. On social media, she shared cheerful images, feigning that all was well, as though nothing had transpired. Feigning the role of the ideal mother, the fierce warrior, the spouse wronged by a distant, unfeeling, and indifferent partner. To Nathan's astonishment, a surprising number of individuals embraced this narrative. Friends, relatives, and even those once close to him began to pull away, as though he truly embodied the dreadful figure she had painted. In that moment, it felt as though he had transformed into a creature that had never been real. The divorce hearing had been set in motion, and if he believed it would merely signify the conclusion of a marriage, he was utterly mistaken. In that moment, he came to understand that Sabrina was prepared to venture far beyond the limits of his imagination. She requested the house, insisted on an outrageous sum for alimony, sought the cars, the savings, and, as if that were insufficient, claimed full custody of the children. She asserted that he lacked the emotional capacity to be a father, that his presence had always been lacking, that he had never set a commendable example, and that the children would fare better without him in their lives. Nathan absorbed every word in silence, restraining himself with great effort to prevent an eruption of emotions. Yet within, he lay in ruins. Each word she uttered felt like a piercing blow. And the most painful moment was witnessing Emily and Logan standing by her side, validating every word. As though he were, in truth, an outsider, an unwelcome guest, a soul who had no rightful place within that family. The anguish he experienced that day was beyond words. An ache that stands alone, unmatched by any other experience. For the first time, he experienced an emotion he had never envisioned, the profound realization of being utterly expendable. In the days that ensued, Nathan came to understand that clinging to any connections in that situation would merely extend the anguish. Thus, he resolved to take a bold step. He parted with what he could, resigned from his job, relocated his position to a far-off branch, and departed, unseen, unannounced, and utterly ephemeral. He gathered the remnants of his dignity and turned to leave. He found himself at a crossroads, compelled to begin anew. He found himself at a crossroads, compelled to reconstruct the very essence of who he was. For there, in that very location, within that atmosphere, amidst that situation, only remnants lingered. Upon his arrival in the unfamiliar city, he resolved to silence all communication from others. He withdrew into himself, sever all ties with what once was. He transformed into a man of chilling detachment, marked by an arid demeanor. He poured every ounce of his energy into his work, forsaking friendships, relationships, and any semblance of connection. All that he had once held dear, love, family, and loyalty, had perished. Within him, a singular certainty lingered. From that moment forward, he vowed to never let anyone inflict such pain upon him again. 7 years had slipped away since the moment Nathan abandoned all that he once knew. 7 years spent reconstructing his existence from the ground up, in a city untouched by the shadows of his past, where no one recognized his scars or the specters that haunted him. Despite the fractures in his heart that felt beyond mending, life, in its unpredictable manner, brought forth a presence that held the power to mend the scars he had long deemed unhealable. Sophia materialized as if summoned, catching him completely unaware. A formidable woman, full of generosity, radiating a lightness that stood in stark contrast to the burdens he bore, a person who carried her own scars and fought her own wars, yet perceived in him a depth that transcended the mere remnants of his history. Initially, he pushed back. He made every effort to distance himself from her. He shunned discussions beyond the confines of his job, turned down invitations, and retreated into a solitary existence, as if convinced that love was a snare he wished to evade forever. Yet, Sophia stood apart. She refrained from insisting, from imposing her will. She existed in that moment, an undeniable presence. Present and attentive, with a patience that gradually dismantled every defense he had constructed. In that moment of realization, a smile crept upon his face. Unnoticed by him, he longed for her presence, though he was reluctant to acknowledge it. And in that moment of realization, he found himself utterly captivated by love. Their bond blossomed with a spontaneity he had never envisioned feeling once more. Years later, their love blossomed with the arrival of Lily, a girl who introduced Nathan to a depth of affection he had never known before. Nurturing that child, witnessing her development, and hearing her refer to him as Dad rekindled a fragment of his soul he believed had long perished. After countless years, a profound sense of belonging enveloped him, as if he had finally arrived at the very place he was meant to be. He possessed a wife whose love for him was unwavering, a daughter who radiated joy in his life, a home brimming with affection, and a sanctuary that, at last, felt complete. Just as tranquility settled over his life, an ordinary afternoon was interrupted by the sudden ring of his phone. A number shrouded in mystery. For a fleeting moment, He considered turning a blind eye, yet an undeniable urge compelled him to respond. On the other end of the line, a familiar voice resonated, one he recognized all too well. Emily, the daughter he had not laid eyes on, had not exchanged words with, had not received any news from since the fateful day he chose to depart and embark on a new chapter of his life. Her voice trembled, filled with uncertainty and a hint of apprehension. A profound stillness enveloped the space between her words, as though she were summoning the strength to articulate her thoughts. At last, when her voice broke through the silence, she uttered words that sent his heart racing, stirring emotions long dormant within him. She announced that she was on the brink of marriage. Should he agree? She envisioned him accompanying her down the aisle. For a fleeting moment, Nathan found himself at a loss for words. Time seemed to freeze, enveloping him in a stillness that felt all-consuming. The man who had mastered the art of moving forward, who had grown accustomed to the void, who had constructed a life devoid of longing for what once was, now stood there, absorbing the unexpected request of his daughter, a desire he had never envisioned she would express. He inhaled deeply, and just as he was about to reply, Emily's tears began to flow. She expressed her remorse, claiming to have gained clarity, revealing that she had been deceived, that her upbringing was steeped in falsehoods, and that she once held beliefs that, in this moment, she recognizes as fabrications. She had devoted years to nurturing a resentment that, at its core, ought never to have taken root, and that, beyond a simple request to accompany her down the aisle, was a heartfelt plea for forgiveness. A heartfelt request for them to find a way to reconnect. Nathan remained quiet. A part of him yearned to respond with an immediate yes, to embrace her tightly, to cast aside all worries, and to reclaim his role as her father once more. Yet another part held on to the memories of all he had endured, the pain he had faced, the scars that remained, raw and pulsing. Yet, beneath the surface, he understood that the love he had always harbored for his children remained ever-present. It lay in wait, wounded and concealed, yet it never truly vanished. With a voice thick with emotion, he finally responded that, indeed, he would accept. Yet, prior to the wedding, it was essential for them to engage in conversation, to elucidate every matter, to release all that had been pent up over the years. Several days passed, and yet another unexpected twist unfolded. Logan, the youngest son, extended his hand toward him as well. Much like Emily, he bore his own regrets. He too had come to understand, through the passage of time, that the narrative he had been raised on was not the whole truth. He recounted the countless hours he devoted to unraveling the mystery of his father's sudden disappearance, only to come to the poignant realization that his father had been compelled to depart. He escaped to endure, to stave off the encroaching madness. Now, he yearned to reclaim what had once slipped through his fingers. The reconnection was an experience Nathan had never envisioned reliving. Gradually, they engaged in conversation, grasped one another's feelings, shed tears, embraced, and, above all, found it in their hearts to forgive. Sophia, familiar with the tale, embraced Emily and Logan with warmth and sincerity. Lily, until that moment, had only been aware of her two older siblings existing somewhere in the shadows of her father's past. Now, she encountered them face to face. To the astonishment of all, that bond emerged in a manner so organic and heartfelt that it seemed as though they had never experienced separation. The long-awaited day of Emily's wedding dawned. Nathan felt a flutter of anxiety in his stomach. No matter how many conversations had unfolded or how deeply emotional the reunions had been, nothing could prepare him for the experience that lay ahead. A tapestry woven from threads of pride, love, fear, and gratitude. Amidst it all, a profound sense emerged that, against all odds, he was precisely where he was meant to be. The instant Emily emerged, clad in her wedding gown, clutching the bouquet, and gliding toward him, was utterly beyond words. She possessed a beauty that was undeniable, her eyes brimming with unshed tears, stifling the sobs that threatened to escape. When their gazes intertwined, they embraced, a poignant reunion of father and daughter, bound by an unbreakable connection that endured through all trials, eye and that embrace. It seemed as though all the moments of time had converged into a singular instant. In that moment, all the pain, the grudges, the tears, the absences, and the sleepless nights melted away. As they strolled side by side toward the altar, fleeting glances intertwined, smiles danced between them, and tears cascaded from the eyes of many witnesses. Yet, amidst the warmth of love and the spirit of reconciliation, an unforeseen event unfolded. Out of nowhere, amidst the gathering, an unexpected figure emerged. Sabrina. She arrived as though she believed she still possessed a semblance of power, control, or influence. She strode in, her head held high, exuding an air of superiority, as though she still possessed the power to unsettle those around her. Yet, what she discovered was entirely contrary to her expectations. Not a single person paused to glance her way, not one soul appeared disturbed, and no one rose to inquire about her presence. Emily, upon noticing her presence, locked eyes with her mother and, brimming with confidence, declared, "You don't belong here." Your decision was made, and ours followed suit. Sabrina found herself at a loss for words. For the first time, she appeared uncertain of her next move. She cast her eyes upon her children, who remained oblivious to her presence, their gazes averted. She gazed at Nathan, who stood resolute, clasping his daughter's hand, a silent testament that, in that moment, she held no sway, no significance, no place of worth. She attempted to articulate her thoughts, to explain her existence in that moment. Yet Emily remained unyielding. She declared that this was her day, that this moment was rightfully reserved for those who genuinely played a part in shaping her life. If Sabrina held any respect for her, she ought to take her leave. In a moment devoid of escape, filled with embarrassment and shame, she turned away and departed, perhaps for the first time grasping that the control she once believed she wielded over that family had, in truth, slipped through her fingers. The ceremony unfolded, brimming with heightened emotion, overflowing with love, and imbued with deeper significance. On that day, a profound realization swept through the gathering. Love, loyalty, respect, and forgiveness possess an enduring strength that eclipses any falsehood. When a family is founded on truth, no passage of time, no suffering, and no individual can tear it apart. Several weeks slipped by following Emily's wedding. At last, it appeared that life had unveiled the equilibrium Nathan had long pursued. The encounter with his children had replenished parts of his soul he thought would remain empty forever. It was in the midst of a languid afternoon when Nathan's phone suddenly rang. Upon catching sight of Logan's name illuminating the screen, he responded without hesitation. The timbre of his son's voice resonated with an unfamiliar quality. Melancholic, burdened, encumbered by an elusive shadow he struggled to name, Logan wasted no time in addressing the matter at hand. He expressed a pressing need to converse, insisting that it must be done in person, face to face. Nathan's concern deepened as he sought to grasp the situation, yet Logan persisted in asserting that the matter was too sensitive for a phone conversation. He mentioned he was en route and that the matter at hand was grave. As Logan drove to meet him, his thoughts were consumed by a single, recurring scene. Hours earlier, unnoticed by anyone, he had wandered past his mother's room and, by mere chance, caught a glimpse of a conversation he never thought he would encounter in his lifetime. Sabrina was engaged in a lively conversation with a friend, her laughter mingling with playful jabs. Yet, amidst the jovial exchange, she inadvertently revealed a truth that shattered Logan's reality. She expressed, with unmistakable clarity, her long-held uncertainties regarding Logan's true parentage and whether he was genuinely Nathan's son. At that moment, she had become entangled with another man, and even now, that doubt persisted, yet she chose to conceal it, buried deep, as if it were a trivial matter. Logan stood still, caught in a moment of unexpected stillness. It struck him with the force of a gut-wrenching blow. He stood frozen, absorbing each word, until, unable to contain himself any longer, he suddenly stepped into the room. Sabrina's complexion drained of color. She became utterly still in that moment. She attempted to end the call swiftly, feigning it was all in jest, that her words were mere nonsense, filled with laughter, weaving tales of her own invention. Yet, Logan remained unconvinced by her words. He locked his gaze with hers and, for the very first time, uttered words with a conviction he never realized resided within him. He inquired whether it was indeed true. He inquired whether she had woven a tapestry of deceit throughout her entire existence. Sabrina found herself at a loss for words, her voice faltering as she averted his gaze. She attempted to brush it off, forcing a laugh that felt hollow, as if trying to mask the discomfort with a jest that fell flat. Yet, in that instant, the space for humor or deceit had vanished entirely. Logan departed the house, engulfed in a profound sense of despair. He slipped into the car, his mind consumed by a singular purpose: the search for his father. At that moment, there was only one person in the world he felt compelled to reach out to, and that was Nathan. Upon his arrival, Nathan instantly sensed that something was amiss. His son stood there, a ghostly figure, eyes brimming with tears, a tempest of emotions swirling within him, poised on the brink of eruption. Logan inhaled deeply and laid bare his soul, revealing every detail without reservation. He meticulously recounted every word he heard, capturing it all with precision. And upon hearing it, Nathan sensed the weight of his world crumbling once more. It felt like a scar he believed had mended was violently torn apart, an intense, piercing, overwhelming agony. Yet, despite the constriction in his chest, he restrained his feelings, gazed into his son's eyes, and, before any thought could intrude, declared without falter, "Yes, you are my son. You have eternally existed and shall continue to do so. This has always been a certainty for me, and it shall remain so." Yet Logan found himself too rattled. Despite the reassurance of his father's love, he found himself yearning for answers, craving something tangible to quell the turmoil within him. Then he expressed his desire to undergo a DNA test. Nathan, in a moment of instinct, asserted that there was no need for such actions, that they were superfluous, that he had nothing to prove, for nothing could alter the essence of what they were. Yet, Logan remained adamant. He expressed a need for it, claiming that only then could he grasp the entirety of his emotions. This was not a matter of love. Rather, it was about seeking clarity, confronting a specter that had woven itself into the fabric of his existence. Confronted by his son's unwavering determination, Nathan inhaled deeply, clasped Logan's hands in his own, and replied that if this choice would usher in tranquility, then they would embrace it together. Thus, they proceeded. Together, they ventured into the lab. They meticulously completed forms, gathered samples, and departed, burdened by the heavy anticipation that stretched the days into what felt like an eternity. With each day that slipped by, time seemed to stretch, elongating into what felt like an entire month, a swirling tempest of anxiety, fear, and insecurity, all intertwined in a chaotic dance. Yet, amidst it all, Nathan maintained his routine with a serene composure. He possessed an unwavering resolve, no document, no examination, no validation could ever alter the profound emotions he harbored for the son he had nurtured, cherished, instructed, and loved from the very first moment of his existence. As the moment arrived for the results to be unveiled, they gathered together to share in the anticipation. And there it stood, a moment suspended in time. What they both harbored in the depths of their minds was now inscribed, sealed, and beyond question. Nathan was not, in a biological sense, Logan's father. The confirmation detonated with explosive force. Logan succumbed to despair. He wept with a depth he had never experienced before. In that moment, it felt as though the very ground he stood upon had shattered beneath him. The agony enveloped me like a heavy fog. Yet, just as he teetered on the brink of despair, Nathan enveloped him in a firm, unwavering embrace, and with a voice thick with emotion, declared, "This changes absolutely nothing. You are my child. You have always been that way. You shall forever remain. And nothing, without exception, will alter that fact, neither this document, nor history, nor any individual." In that instant, Logan grasped the profound essence of what it truly means to belong to a family. Thus commenced a fresh chapter in the journey of life. As the weeks unfolded, the connection between them deepened, weaving an unbreakable thread of intimacy. Emily and her husband reached a decision that astonished and, simultaneously, touched the hearts of all who heard it. They chose to relocate to the city where Nathan resided, for they had come to understand, more profoundly than ever, that life is too fleeting to be distanced from those who genuinely count. Logan, having grown in maturity and confidence, secured an apartment merely a few blocks away from his father's residence. He yearned for closeness, to construct a future where love, respect, and truth stood as the sole pillars. From that moment on, weekends transformed into something sacred, reunions filled with warmth, sizzling grills, joyous laughter, flowing dialogues, playful competitions, and heartfelt embraces. Lily was nurtured in a vibrant household, embraced by the affection of her siblings, the steadfast presence of her father, the remarkable care of her mother, and an atmosphere rich with warmth and love. Sabrina found herself in solitude, enveloped solely by her decisions, her missteps, and the solitude she had crafted for her own existence. Life possesses an uncanny ability to reflect back all that you offer to the universe. Ultimately, those who sow deceit will harvest nothing but void. Those who sow suffering shall harvest isolation. Those who sow love will harvest the very essence of what Nathan, Sophia, Emily, Logan, and Lily experience today, a rich life brimming with affection, connection, and tranquility. I appreciate your time spent watching the video. If you found it enjoyable, be sure to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications to stay updated on all the latest content. Until we meet again.